why would, in your worldview, God basically, it almost seems like set or give people different opportunities to get to heaven or hell?
Yeah.
And how does that coincide with free will when it seems like in general so many people tend to just follow the religion into which they were born?
So just because my parents told me that Jesus is the truth doesn't mean that he's not the truth, right?
Yeah.
So becoming an adult means you have to think for yourself. And the majority of my atheist friends grew up in Christian homes. Okay? So just because you grew up in a home that taught something doesn't mean you have to follow it. You have a free will, you're responsible. Is God going to judge me differently from a guy who was born in Papua New Guinea and never heard about Christ? You bet. God is going to judge us according to what we had as opportunities. God is not going to judge us based on our ignorance. So because God is all-knowing, he's in a position to judge each one of us uniquely, fairly, and justly.
Say someone follows a different religion that they were taught and that they believe to be true.
Yeah.
You think God will judge them in a way, like, I presume that if they were exposed to Christianity, you would say they would go to hell. But what if they believe just as much as you that their religion is true?
Good.
Or what if an atheist believes that they're right?
This pink elephant, you know, the one right here? This pink elephant gives my life meaning, purpose, and direction. This pink elephant is awesome.
I'd say your pink elephant is the same thing as you saying that God exists. So like
Good.
what? So what? Like what? How come you get to decide that your God is the correct God?
Okay, I don't decide that my God is the correct God. The question is the evidence supporting the pink elephant who's right here?
No.
Thank you. No. Does the evidence support some type of a God existing?
No.
No?
I'd say no one can actually know if God. I'd say I'm agnostic because I don't believe anyone could actually know that God exists.
I think it's impossible to live an agnostic life because you have to make ethical decisions every day, and the ethical decisions you make tattle what you really believe. You have to make a decision every day. Are people valuable or are they trash? The decision you make shows what you really believe about reality. You have to make a decision every day. That guy in that casket or in that urn, is there life after death or not? You have no decision, you have no option. You have to decide. So you see, sir, the decisions that you make tattle what you really believe. So please don't tell me you're agnostic.
I'm still agnostic. Like that doesn't show that. I'm saying that I believe that no one can believe that no one can truly know if their God is correct or not. Like I don't believe that you can truly be 100% sure.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
I'm not 100% sure that I'm not a bad dream you're having right now.
Yeah.
Okay? All right, so we agree on that.
Yes.
I can't prove anything 100%.
Correct.
But guess what? As a thinking human being, I don't base my life on proof. I base my life on evidence. The evidence is that his face starts right there. That's why my fist stops here. Not because I can prove to you 100% that he's right here. Maybe my eyesight's lying to me.
But they're like, yeah, that's true. But we tend to just go off the presupposition that our senses like work. But
No, I don't go off a presupposition that my senses work. I experience this.
that's a sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Well, I'm not presupposing that my senses tell me the truth. I'm experiencing this. And I know very well that if I smack him, there's going to be contact. Why? Because the evidence of my experience tells me that's true. Because I've been hit and didn't feel good. So the evidence is that, yes, my senses perceive reality. That's why I trust my senses.
Well, but that's a circular position. So you trust your senses in a
Because
circular way.
No, I experience my senses putting me in touch with reality. That's why I trust my senses.
So you have no presuppositions, like.
Yes, I have presuppositions, but I can promise you, as a thinking person, I'm going to question those presuppositions, and I'm going to ask why. Why have I embraced those presuppositions? And the reason that I have embraced the presupposition that my senses perceive reality is because I experience contact, touch, and I talk with him and we find out yes. Now, Why do you trust your reason?
My point is, reason is a presupposition. Like, there is nothing to base it off of, but we act as if it exists. Same thing with your senses. When you're saying that you touch him and you believe that you're touching him, in general, science would say that you could theoretically put your hand, and one in like hundreds of billions of times it would go through him. That's the thing that's said in such. Do you disagree with that?
I sure do.
So you disagree? So you disagree with science?
Yeah. Walk through the tree. Please,
Well,
go right ahead. Walk through the tree.
It's unlikely because the particles are moving, but in general,
the particles are moving, and your particles are moving. So why can't you walk through the tree?
Well, theoretically, you could. In
Theoretically,
just
baloney. I can't base my life on theoretical.
Crazy doesn't mean that in science it can't theoretically happen. I know it sounds crazy, but
thank you. It sure does sound crazy.
In science, that does happen.
Oh no, it does not happen. I have never watched a man or a woman walk through a tree.
I've never watched someone be resurrected.
Good. But guess what? You do know that existence is real, that life is real. And so now you've got to ask yourself the question, is it more reasonable to believe that life comes from non-life, that existence is produced by non-existence, or is it more reasonable to believe that life comes from life and that existence comes from a creator? What's more plausible? Not what you can prove. I know you can't prove anything, neither can I. But what is more plausible? What is more reasonable in light of the evidence?
Yes.
That's what you got to ask. And don't give me this garbage that, oh no, science has to prove something in order for me to believe it. Science has nothing to say about love. It has nothing to say about meaning in life. It has nothing to say about life after death. Nothing. Because science deals with what you can observe, what you can quantify. And you can't observe and quantify love, meaning, and whether there's life after death or not. It's far more reasonable to believe that morals come not from matter, but that morals come from a personal being who defines what's right and wrong. It's far more reasonable to believe that life comes from life. It is not reasonable for any of you guys to believe life comes from non-life. Oh, that's a miracle, guys. The only problem is you guys don't have a miracle worker. There's no God for you.
Hold up.
No, don't hold on. Think. Think hard. Think accurately. Life does not come from non-life. Never. Can you show me life coming from non-life? And yet you guys believe in a miracle.
No.
Life comes from non-life at the inception.
We believe in low probability things.
Oh, baloney. Low probability did not make him.
Yes, it did.
No, it did not.
Actually, that's 100% what happened.
No. He has a mom and a dad. He has a mom and a dad. He doesn't have low probability made you, buddy. Aren't you lucky, sucker?
This is like the craziest argument ever.
I think you are a little bit crazy. I think you are.
Think about this. Genetics, right?
Yeah, genetics.
Yeah. What is the probability of his exact genetic code happening? 100%?
Sir, you're making a classic mistake of the observation of different sperm and different eggs. Gosh, what's the probability? That doesn't create anything. That's a statistical fact, okay? But that doesn't create him. What creates him is a mom and a dad, two living beings creating him. You don't get life from a statistic. And by the way, you don't win the lottery because of a statistic. You win the lottery by buying a ticket. And that's my whole point. Science is a wonderful description of reality. But I can promise you, science doesn't create. Science describes creation. It describes life. Bravo. But you can't say science made this guy. No, science didn't make him.
So God made humans, right?
Yeah, God made humans.
Why did he give them leukemia, though?
He didn't. Human beings rebelled against God. We went over this already in Genesis chapter 3. When we rebelled against God, that's where things got messed up.
I mean, I didn't rebel against God.
Oh, yes, you have.
Okay, so what's your...
So have I, by the way. I've rebelled against God also.
Sure, so all those little toddlers who get leukemia, because they do, and that's very sad. They deserved it?
No, they didn't deserve it, but they are born into an unfair world, a messed up world.
Yes, but that is an evil explicitly created by God.
No, it is not.
That is not.
It is a free decision to rebel against God. And when people make that free decision...
the free decision to rebel against God, which is why he got leukemia.
No, false. The guy gets leukemia because he's born into an unfair, broken, messed up world. That's the world I was born into. That's the world all of you were born into.
So wait, remind me, the world is messed up and broken, which is why the kid gets leukemia. What made the world messed up and broken again?
Human beings rebelled against God.
But human
Like
beings
Eden,
weren't-
or are we talking like in general, us right now?
We're talking about our forefathers and foremothers, and me and you. We've all rebelled against God,
Okay,
and that
but
leads
you
to
believe in
destructiveness.
determinism.
So
No, I don't
but
believe.
does it-
You have to believe in determinism.
I do.
Good, bravo, well done.
Thanks. Yeah.
Good.
I believe in that
Smack.
viewpoint.
Smack. Why'd you hit her, Cliff? Because I had to. It was
Well,
determined
no,
that I hit her.
It's not I had to.
Oh, yes, it is if you believe in
happened.
determinism.
It's not I had to, it happened.
Oh, it happened.
Yes,
Yeah,
correct.
baloney.
What do you mean baloney?
Determinism means it has been determined that I hit her.
Yes, correct. Well,
Thank you.
yes,
That's
yes.
right, you're right.
Yeah.
Okay, and my point is, if I hit her, turn to you and you ask me, why'd you hit her? And I say, because I had to. It was determined. You know I'm lying through my teeth, I hope.
well,
That's not at all.
That's
what
not what
determinism
yeah,
is, to
yeah.
the extent that
Determinism means it has been determined. Determinism means I don't have a choice. It's been determined. Let's be honest with our language, guys.
I'm being honest.
No, you're not.
Yes, I completely am. I said I believe in determinism. If you hit her, it wasn't. There's nothing of you that makes it your fault. There is no your fault.
Good.
It's just inputs and outputs.
Good.
How you're genetic. I
Yep.
fully believe in determinism. I'm not lying.
But you can't live it out.
Yes, I can.
If
Every
I
word
smack
that's coming
her,
out of my mouth
are you going to
has
hold
been
that me
criticized.
responsible for smacking her or not?
What do you mean?
Are you going to say,
There
Cliff,
is no
it
you.
was wrong? There's good. I like
I
you.
yes,
Very
I'm
good. There's no
consistent. I know
you.
it's like you.
And I would insist you are wrong, and it's proven by you how you live your life.
No.
Hey, this woman says I love you, and you say, I understand, you have to love me. You don't live that way, man. And if I smack her, you're not going to say, oh, Cliff, you had to smack her. And if I'm racist, you're not going to say,
Well,
oh,
using
Cliff,
the
I
word-
understand. You
No,
have to be racist.
No, that's the worst mischaracterization. It's inputs and outputs that create racist people. That's the way to characterize.
Oh, I see.
Yes.
So all my white racist friends have input and output,
Yes.
and they just have to do what they're determined to do.
Have to do it. It just comes to.
Oh, come on now.
Inputs and outputs.
Determinism means
is what it
there's
means.
no you. You just do what you're programmed to do.
Yeah, that's true.
Thank you.
You're
So
doing
be
what you're programmed
consistent.
to do.
And I'm standing here saying, my white racist friends, I got to look them in the face and say, you're wrong, and you better change your behavior.
And maybe that will be an input that changes their behavior. And that input comes, and you saying that comes from things that happen to you. And things that happened to you come from other inputs and outputs.
Yeah.
Okay.
Determinism.
Let me
Well, I don't agree with you because
I
I
know,
don't
we
think.
disagree.
Exactly.
It's okay.
I don't think that my behavior is determined by my bad potty training from my mom and dad. I insist.
It's one of your inputs.
No, it's not.
Yes, it
My behavior is a result of my free choice.
Okay, quick question.
I disagree.
Wait.
Don't interrupt. We're with him, and we'll get to you.
Fine, yeah.
Go ahead.
No,
I mean-
I'm building off of his.
No, forget it. He's talking. Go ahead.
I completely disagree. I think every word that's coming out of my mouth,
Yes.
all this vocabulary, like
Right.
everything I know,
Right.
comes from inputs and outputs. All of my beliefs come from inputs and outputs.
Yeah.
I disagree with you because of inputs and outputs. If I was in your situation and I grew up like you, I had the exact same genetics, I would be standing there like you, and you would be standing here like me.
Okay.
Inputs and outputs.
So yes, determinism possibly is right. But if a dude, all right, come here, you dude with a beard. Let me hear a second. All right. So this guy comes around a corner with a stack of books under his arm. I haul back, smack him as hard as I can. I'm hauled into a court of law. I stand before a judge, and the judge says, hey, Cliff, why on earth did you go up and smack this guy as hard as you can? I say, it's very simple, Your Honor. I grew up with an abusive father. And my abusive father had a little balding, gray hair like this. And whenever he would abuse me, he would take a big book and slam me over the head. And this dude just so reminded me of my abusive father that I had to haul back and hit him.
Yes.
The judge will say, Cliff, I'm really sorry that you had that kind of abusive father.
Yes.
But you are still responsible for hauling back and punching him. The legal system in the United States, I am glad, is based not on determinism, it is based on the free will that we all have, which means we are responsible for what we do.
I don't think that, I think that in general, people who were abused, do you agree, tend to abuse more in the future. Do you disagree with that? One
I
input
don't
leads
think that a
to
person who's
similar
been abused has to be an
They
abuser.
They don't have to, because there are other inputs and outputs. But if someone is abused, it seems like in general they tend to abuse more.
Does
You disagree
anybody
with that?
love you?
I really hope so.
Well, then if you hope so, it means you value love, right?
Well, yeah, but I would disagree with what love is when you say it.
And I respect your intellectual consistency. I respect it highly. You're living it out. And I think it's scary.
Why?
Why?
Yeah.
Because it means that I am not responsible for what I do. What I do has been determined.
I don't want to like make it political, but like things that, like for example, structural racism, like stuff that has happened in the past leads
Yeah.
to things in the future.
Right.
This is where these ideas come from.
Yeah.
Things that happen in the past affect what happens in the future.
Yeah.
Right? And if you take all the inputs and outputs of the world that happened in the past,
Yeah.
that is why we are where we are today, and what is happening the way it is today.
Okay.
That's the idea.
I disagree.
Okay, yeah. That's
You know
fine.
why? I respect Harriet Tubman. I respect Gandhi. I respect Mother Teresa. Well, why, Cliff? Why do you respect those people? Because obviously they didn't have to do what they did. Instead, they chose to contradict their culture. They chose to contradict their upbringing. And they chose to fight the caste system, to fight slavery at the cost of their lives. That's why I respect them. I don't respect them because they had to do what they did. And I don't excuse a racist because you grew up in a racist environment, and so therefore you have to hate people of different ethnic heritages. Baloney. You don't have to hate anybody. You choose to hate, you choose to love. You choose to forgive, or you choose to stick it to a person who's hurt you. That's my experience of reality, guys. Now, if your experience is different, so be it. But I think you're lying to yourself and you're lying to me. You know very well that you respect Gandhi, Dr. Martin Luther King, Abraham Lincoln. Why? Because they contradicted their culture. They contradicted their environment. They followed their conscience instead of following the status quo. Now, if you don't respect those people for that reason, fine.
You respect the things they
Tell me why you respect them. Well, I don't respect them, Cliff. Well, there would be another disagreement that you and I would have.
I don't think they exist anymore, for example.
All right.
The people who are dead.
All right. I feel like paying you for standing out here and going at it with me. I cannot thank you enough. And I really respect your intellectual consistency. I am sick and tired of talking to atheists who say, oh no, they're moral objective truths. Baloney. You know they're not. I know they're not, if there is no God.
Yes.
If there is no God, it's all a pile of chemicals, and we're just living out our chemical reactions.
Correct.
Correct. Except when you go home tonight, you can't treat your roommate that way, and you can't treat the woman you're dating that way unless you want to blow up your relationship fairly fast.
What do you mean? When I go home and I do the things I do, it's because of inputs and outputs. When I treat someone well, it's because I've been taught to treat people well.
No.
Yes.
It's because you make a decision about
it isn't.
how to handle those inputs and those outputs.
Well, your chemical structure
Yeah.
makes a decision.
The point, I agree with you. There are chemical reactions in the brain. We agree. My point is, there is still a you that makes a decision how you're going to treat your chemical inputs and outputs.
Of the chemical structures. You
Yep.
believe there's something but you would agree we can't point to that thing, and we can't.
That's
there's nothing
right.
to
It's
point to.
not material.
But it's nothing. There is
No, it is very real.
Not material. There's no evidence of this.
Oh, yes, there is.
No, there is.
Yes, there is. Your brain, I can physically dissect your head and touch your brain and analyze it. Your thoughts, I don't have any access physically to your thoughts.
Well, wait. Yes, you.
No, I
What
don't.
You do.
I cannot take your thoughts and
wait,
put them in a
that's
test tube. I can take your brain and put it in a test tube, but I
yeah,
cannot
but-
take your thoughts.
But you can connect things to my brain and see what I'm thinking.
No, I cannot
That's
see your
fine.
motives.
Not-
I cannot see your
Oh, you're
motives.
changing it now, though. But you can know what someone is thinking about. You can know if someone, for example, let's say someone connects something to your brain, they can see and puts up a thing, and they're like, "Do you agree with this?" They can tell if your brain agrees with it or not.
I make a decision.
Okay.
In other words, not the chemicals made a
What made you
decision.
Make that decision.
Yes.
A lot of different issues.
A lot of
No, no.
Environment, genetic makeup, will, free will, love, forgiveness.
Okay.
Some of them are very tangible, like genetics, like my environment, and others of them are intangible, like love, forgiveness, compassion, empathy.
And
That's
what
why I
made
do
you
it.
feel those things?
Pardon?
What made you feel those things?
I can change my mind. You can change your
You
mind.
can change your
You
mind,
can-
but you
Yep.
have to will to change your mind. Where did that will come from?
It came from my soul, from me,
Okay.
from my
And where did
rational
that-
mind,
and where
my
did that come
conscience,
from?
my emotions. That comes
Where-
from God.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
comes
Those
from
are
God, so you
God-given
have to-
gifts.
So,
But if there is no God, those gifts do not exist. There's no part, it's not a chemical. My will is part of my soul, an intangible soul that I have because God made me. A body, yes, chemicals, yes, but also a soul, intangible consciousness.
okay, for the sake of contradiction, let's assume there's a soul, right? This soul willed something, right? It wills you to want to consume alcohol. It wills you to want to go outside. It wills you to study your calculus homework. Some part of you wills it, and then that happens. Some part of your soul, some part of whatever intangible sense,
Thank you.
it has been willed, right?
Thank you.
You do what you will,
Uh-huh.
yeah. And if you want to change that will, part of you needs to will that, right?
Part of you,
Soul, in sense,
all
I'm
right,
not
the
going to
free
get into
will
the
that we
syntactical
have
problem here.
chooses to do that.
Yeah. So if you choose to do that, you chose to do that because of something else, right? Like if I choose to stop consuming alcohol, I had to want to not consume alcohol.
I chose to think through the consequences of
What
alcoholism.
made you want to will through the consequences?
What made what?
What made you want to look through the consequences of consuming alcohol?
Because I got some buddies who are alcoholics.
Okay. So
I saw how they destroyed themselves through their alcoholism,
Okay.
and I decided I don't want to go down that path. And I got other buddies who crammed too much fat into their bodies and their arteries are clogged. And I decided I'd like to see my grandchildren get married. So I'm not going to put cholesterol into my body.
So what you're saying is that it's something outside of yourself.
And what I'm saying is I made an observation of reality,
Okay.
and based on my observation of reality, I made some decisions.
How can you say that you have free will if your will originated from something outside of yourself?
Because we've gone over this and you're not listening.
I
I
think
told
you're
you
not.
flat out, your will is a gift from God.
Yes.
I didn't create my will, you don't create your will. We're born with it. We're born with a conscience, we're born with a rational mind, we're born with a will. Those are gifts that God has given every single one of us.
Okay.
Now the question is, how are you going to use those gifts?
If God is all loving, which in the Christian view he is,
Yes.
there's no reason for there to be people who are not resistant to the idea of God. Like, I would consider myself non-resistant. I'm personally an atheist because that's where the evidence has led me.
Right.
But I have put a lot of effort into trying to figure out the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And I would personally say that I'm not resistant to God, but yet I still don't believe in him.
Uh-huh.
And how could an all-loving God allow a case like that to exist?
I would argue that love demands free will. If it ain't free, it ain't love. It's manipulated, it's coerced, but it's not real love. I would argue to really love someone, you got to make a free decision.
The amount of effort that I've put in to figuring out Christianity, learning about Christianity, I personally wasn't raised with any religion.
Yes.
But for some reason, whatever reason, all the evidence that I've come across through
Yeah.
reading the Bible, going to church, talking to my Christian friends,
Yeah.
listening to debates,
Yeah.
something in my psyche has just told me that atheism is more convincing than theism. How is that my fault that the evidence was not convincing enough to me?
Okay, well, what do you mean when you say atheism is more convincing? How is atheism more convincing to you than Jesus Christ?
There's a lot of things that I could say.
We'll just start at the top, the best reasons.
Sure. The first thing that comes to mind is the problem of animal suffering is really difficult to contend with in
Yeah.
religion.
Yes.
I know for the problem of evil, a lot of Christians say free will, which I understand that argument. but it becomes more difficult when you talk about animal suffering in the wild that doesn't have any human influence. And why would a loving God allow the starvation, disease, predation on billions of animals every day? They're truly suffering.
Yes,
and
there
there's
is.
no promise of heaven for them, because in the Christian view, animals don't have souls. So that just seems really unjust to me, and a loving God wouldn't create that type of system.
Okay, I respect your sensitive conscience. Who defines justice? Why are you so outraged that animals suffer innocently? If there is no God, what is, is. It's not good. It's not evil. You use the word evil. Who defines evil? If there is no God, evil is totally subjective, totally relative. It's a crapshoot.
Like in the atheistic worldview, the world that we see totally makes sense. I'm saying that in the evolution, I would expect to see the world that we're observing with the atheistic worldview, but in a Christian worldview, that's where the problem lies. I'm not saying that.
Don't you see the way you're contradicting yourself? What do you mean? In the atheistic worldview, it makes sense. When you're standing here saying the suffering of innocent animals is evil. Well, if there is no God, the suffering of animals is not evil, it just is. And for you to put a value judgment on it, that it's evil or bad, that's your own illusion. That's your own fantasy. The same way for me to say, if he smacks you in the face, that's evil. Well, that's not evil. He just smacked you in the face. What is.
A better way to phrase the question would be, do you think animal suffering is evil?
Yeah. God clearly
How do you
says,
contend with
don't
that?
cause any animal to suffer. So yes, inflicting pain on animals is not good.
No, but I'm talking about just in nature, like without human involvement. Do you think like a baby deer dying of a disease and suffering a slow death
Is bad.
Okay, so how does a Christian God contend with that?
It's not God who's causing an animal to suffer. It's not God who's causing a person to suffer. That's because they're born into an unfair, messed up world. It's a consequence.
But God is, in the Christian view, is always just and correct, and
God is just. Yes.
If animals don't have souls, they don't have sin.
Yeah.
Which is typically like the Christian reason why humans suffer is because we're sinful. And
No.
we have free will.
No.
And we can choose our own.
No, ma'am. Just
But
read the book
why
of Job. Job suffers. His
Yeah, but-
buddies come to him and say, watertight case. We know why you're suffering, Job, because you sinned. Totally wrong. And the book of Job makes that crystal clear. When they told Job, hey, Job, we know why you're suffering. It's because you're a sinner. And if you just were to repent of your sin, you'd stop suffering. God was angry with them. They were lying. They were inaccurate. See, ma'am, you and I are born, and animals are born, into an unfair, messed up world. And that's why you reel back with indignation, and that's good. You should. And that's why Jesus, when he walked on earth, healed the sick, raised the dead, fed the hungry, because he knew this ain't right. This is not good. This is lousy. You're absolutely correct, ma'am. But you see, if you're an atheist, you're wiping out the basis for understanding this sucks. This is horrible. Because what you're saying is, all of reality is a result of the evolutionary cycle. So this animal, the reason this animal suffers is because of evolution. That's despair if you think about it. I respect you a lot for the way you have just expressed moral outrage over innocent animal suffering. Bravo. But the whole basis of your outrage is a theistic worldview, which says there is a God who created things a certain way. Things got royally messed up. And now the question is, what's the solution to the mess?
Just to get back to my original question,
Yes.
how would you contend with a case like me, someone who's trying to figure out the truth, actively learning about Christianity and theism in general,
Yeah.
and yet the arguments just haven't been convincing to me. Do you think it's something in my subconscious? Am I actually secretly resistant? And if it is in my subconscious or I'm unconscious of it,
Yeah.
then how can I be held liable in the afterlife for
Okay.
my thoughts here?
Obviously, ma'am, I don't know what's motivating you. I think it would be incredibly judgmental for me to try and tell you what's motivating you. Here's what I would have to say to myself. All right, Cliffe, you have decided that there is not enough evidence for Christ. No problem, Cliffe. But listen to yourself talk. There's not enough evidence for me to believe in Christ, which means before I can accept anything, I must have X amount of evidence before I can trust. See what you're saying? You're saying there's not enough evidence for Christ. No problem, I understand. But what you're saying is, Cliffe, in order for me to live for Christ, this standard of evidence must be met. No problem. What's the option that meets that standard of evidence?
I recognize obviously like Jesus is a historical figure.
Yeah.
I guess my problems are more like logical, like problems with theism in general, not necessarily just Christianity.
Okay, now
And I don't know exactly what would be convincing to me, if that answers your question better.
that last statement began to get at it, but ma'am, you still haven't answered the question. What are you living for today that is supported by enough evidence? In other words, what has more evidence to support it than Jesus Christ?
I personally don't believe in any religion.
Or philosophy?
I'm just trying to understand what
You
you're
bet.
asking, sorry.
You cannot be a student at this fine university without being a pretty motivated person, which means you have priorities. It means you have ambition. It means you are living for something that you cannot prove to anybody is the truth. But you have attached a great deal of meaning to your life. That's why you dress in an orderly, beautiful way. That's why you articulate in an orderly speech. And that's why you're at this fine university. You're not here by accident. So what are you living for? In other words, what have you put your faith in? You've got faith. You can't prove to me that UConn's not going to say on your day of graduation, hey, guess what, guys? No diplomas this year. We're going to break tradition. No diplomas. It could happen. But obviously the evidence is that UConn does not do that. And that's why you're investing a fair amount of money and work to get a diploma. That's faith. You can't prove it, but there's evidence. So, you've said to me, sorry, Cliffe, not enough evidence to support Christ. No problem. Now, you've got to answer the question, if you're going to be intellectually consistent and honest, what is the option that is supported by more evidence than Christ that you're living for?
I think I just don't understand what you're saying because I just want to say atheism. I think atheism has more evidence, but I sense that I'm
can't
not
live as an
understanding
atheist.
your question.
All right, let's put it this way. This guy says to me, Cliffe, why don't you believe in Jesus? And I say, because there's not enough evidence. And he says, okay, Cliffe, then what are you living for? And I say, well, nothing. I'm not living for anything. I'm lying.
Okay.
Look
So,
at the
like,
way I'm
what do
dressed.
I value?
Yeah.
I value
Human value,
truth.
human meaning and purpose,
Education.
ethics.
Yeah.
Okay, but what are you living for? And then what's the evidence that whatever it is you are living for is true?
I value like education and happiness.
And happiness?
I personally think you find meaning from your life by finding your own happiness. I don't know if that makes sense to you. I can get
Sure
more
it does.
specific, but
That makes a ton of sense. Okay, now, you've basically communicated my faith is in myself ultimately. I define happiness and the best way to happiness. I define education as a worthy priority in my life. Okay, so what is the evidence that you are more reliable than Christ? Obviously, you've chosen to trust yourself.
yeah. I'd say I just don't. Yeah, I don't really know what you want me to say.
I just
Like
want
the
you to say what you believe in and why you're living for whatever it is you're living for. That's all.
Why do I live for happiness?
Why have you decided to trust yourself as being ultimately reliable instead of trusting Christ. Christ doesn't have enough evidence, so what's the evidence that supports you being so reliable that to put your faith in yourself is wiser, a better decision than putting your faith in Christ?
I don't think I have that much like faith in the religious sense in myself. I try to do what I think is best every day, and sometimes that ends up being wrong, sometimes that ends up being right, but I don't have to. I'm not saying that what I believe in and how I live my life is correct. I'm just doing the best that I can. I'm not trying to convince anybody else here of atheism, but you're trying to convince people here of Christianity. So I don't think I have to contend with the same things that you do.
Oh, come on. Come on now, you can see through that. Ma'am, you're doing something far more significant with your faith than standing out here and talking. You're living your life a certain way. You're treating people a certain way. You're handling money a certain way. You're handling education a certain way. You know very well that the way you live your life shows what you really believe about reality. You know, I'm not sure he's really standing here, okay? I'm not sure. I'm agnostic. I don't know. Right about now, I got to make a decision. Is the preponderance of evidence that pointing to his face starting right there, or can I really believe that his face isn't there, it's just an illusion I'm having? I'm agnostic. I don't know. Well, right about now, I'm going to have to make a decision. I have no choice. Ma'am, you live your life. You have to make choices. Is he valuable or is he trash?
I think human life is valuable.
Why? Why is human life valuable?
I'd say human life is valuable just because we can create meaningful connections and have relationships and have an overall positive experience in life, even if that means in the atheistic worldview that there's nothing in the afterlife. I think even if there's no afterlife, life can still be meaningful.
Okay, before we go on, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for this discussion. This is why I do what I do. And you obviously respect me enough to think very clearly and articulate yourself, and I cannot thank you enough. You've made my day, okay? I'm serious. Oh, you have. You've totally made my day. Okay, but ma'am, remember something. If what you say is true, then if I tell you the meaning of my life is to smack him in the face, you cannot look at me and say, oh no, you're wrong, Cliffe. You can just say, well, Cliffe, from my perspective, that's wrong. But from your perspective, obviously, it's right to smack him in the face. Why? Because as an atheist, you understand it's all relative, which means your definition of good and evil is don't smack him in the face, but it is relative. So if my definition is, oh, you can smack him in the face, Cliffe, you're not wrong. You just make your own relative decision. And you see, you can't live that out.
I think evolutionarily, though, like the reason why we don't go around murdering people and harming others and that we have morality in our society is because that was beneficial to us in our tribes when we were evolving as early humans. And the humans that were violent and didn't want to work together, they didn't survive. So I think a lot of our morality comes from evolution.
You see, ma'am, if you think about it, that is the most blind leap of faith I have ever heard. Why? Because you're putting your faith in a myth, and it's called the myth of progress. That if we just trust the evolutionary cycle, we will get out of our jams. Ma'am, what was the bloodiest century of human history so far?
I'm not sure.
The 20th century. By far the bloodiest history, bloodiest part of human history. Mao Zedong, 37 million slaughtered. Joseph Stalin, 42 million slaughtered. Adolf Hitler, 20 million slaughtered. Pol Pot, 2 million slaughtered. There is no century in human history that is as bloody as the 20th century.
Don't we have more Christians than ever in the 20th century, like population-wise?
I can promise you, ma'am, that's where you got to be real honest with the Bible. Jesus points out that he has a great deal of good in him because he's created in the image of God, and he's also a dirty, rotten sinner, and so am I. Good and evil are within this guy's heart, and they're within my heart. And to be honest with you, I can do some pretty perverted things if there's nobody around to hold me accountable, and if you tick me off enough. I'm embarrassed to say that. I'm not proud of that fact, but it's true. All right? So You know, the fact that there are a bunch of, quote, Christians, unquote, doesn't mean much. Are they really genuinely following Christ? Not in Dachau and Auschwitz and Buchenwald. Not in the slaughter of people in Russia, in the Soviet Union. Not in Pol Pot's Cambodia. No, ma'am.
Yeah, but if your argument is that Christianity provides people with more morality, then you can't say that you can't use the argument that there's just been more violence in the 20th century, and that's why.
No, ma'am. The reason I raise that is because your hope, your confidence is in evolution. That evolution perfects things.
It doesn't perfect things, it selects for survivability.
So I'm currently someone who's like, I was raised as a Christian, I was an atheist for a while. I'm kind of finding God again to some belief. And one of the things I battled with is, kind of like that morality thing. And when you look around at people that are religious, typically, not just Christian, I think any type of religion in general, I do think that they typically have better values, better morals. And he mentioned this, and I watch a lot of your videos. One of the things that he talks about a lot is not following the Bible directly and following the word of Jesus instead. And I think that when you follow something like the word of Jesus, it's kind of like a blueprint for like morals and values and stuff like that. It's not necessarily something that you have to follow. If you're a Christian, it's not like you're gonna have these morals. But like if you listen to the Bible and listen to the word of Jesus, not just what in general, there's like a blueprint for like morals and values and stuff to follow that I think you do see in like a very Christian community, by and large. Obviously, like you said, just being a Christian doesn't make you a good person. But it's that blueprint. Like I think that the Bible, and any religion in general, but for me, I'm more familiar with the Bible, gives you that blueprint of like, hey, this is how to be a good person. This is like what you should do. And I think there's just like thousands of people, thousands of years of history, people, and it's just like their observations of like, hey, this is how you be successful, how you be a good person, and stuff like that. So I really think it's just a blueprint.
Excellent. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
If Christianity is true, I don't want to go to hell. So what would you say to me, who I don't think I'm a resistant non-believer?
Well, then I would appeal to Blaise Pascal, the brilliant French thinker. The wager. If you're right that there is no God, I don't lose anything. If I'm right that God is real and that Jesus Christ is the way to heaven, you lose everything.
If it was all that simple, then we wouldn't see so many conflicting religions. If there was enough evidence for everyone, if people just sat down and read the evidence, then I think we'd see a lot more Christians in the world. But we have so many different faiths because the religion that people were raised with is typically what they grow into.
Uh-huh.
I think if it were as simple as just reading more evidence, we wouldn't have religious wars. Everyone would probably be in the same religion. I think that's kind of reductive.
Uh-huh. Well, I think it's incredibly reductive to say that morality is relative, but then to start out your discussion with me by communicating your outrage over the suffering of animals. If there is no God and if everything's relative, why are you so upset about the suffering of animals?
Because I think pain is a bad thing.
Fine. You acknowledge it, it's all relative. So if it's all relative, what are you getting so stoked about? That animals suffer. It just is. If your worldview is right. See, my point is you're not living out your worldview. If I say, I believe in Jesus, and you watch me go out and womanize after I speak here, you're going to point your finger at my face and say, Cliffe, you're a hypocrite. And you'd be right. Well, similarly, if you're going to tell me that everything's relative, but you're really outraged over the pain that animals experience, you're an intellectual hypocrite because you're contradicting what you believe.
I would argue that it's not a contradiction. I don't think you need to bring morality into the fact that we can, the world that we observe with how our ecosystems function and how much suffering is in nature.
Yep.
I don't think you need to talk about moral relativism to understand that that's.
Okay, ma'am, you started it. You said evil.
Because
that's a moral statement.
I'm
evil.
saying Christians need to contend with that, not atheists.
You're outraged over what you call evil.
Yeah,
You
but
can't escape it.
I'm not bringing up morality, you are.
No, you brought it up when you said evil. You were the first one to say
Not
evil.
evil in the Christian sense.
Don't be so upset about
But I'm
animals.
asking why you believe in it. I feel like there's like a misunderstanding.
Oh, no, I communicate. No, there's no misunderstanding, ma'am.
Okay, so then why
I
do you-
communicated crystal clearly to you. In Genesis 3, we read how human beings rebelled against God and the earth was cursed. And we went over Job together. And we pointed out that life is unfair. So animals and human beings are born into an unfair world. It's not fair. That is why Jesus came. To solve the unfairness, to solve death, to give eternal life. See, if you're an atheist, not only do you have no basis for saying that's really wrong, you have no basis for saying there's hope for the future. Because as we talked about, evolutionary optimism is bankrupt. Evolution does not solve our problems.
Evolutionists aren't claiming that, first off.
There are many Americans who have embraced an optimism based on evolution that is unfounded. It's intellectual suicide.
Okay, well,
Based on the 20th century. And all the people were slaughtered.
Yeah, but evolution isn't saying that we're going to eventually reach some, like...
I am aware of that, that's right. But philosophically, that's where many go.
Okay, that's just not where I go.
Well, where do you go? What's your view of the future?
I don't know what my view of the future. Like, you mean
Oh,
like...
come on, you have hope for the
success of
future?
humans?
Don't you have hope for the future?
A reasonable amount.
What's it based on? Why do you have hope for the future?
I think everyone is trying to do their best every day. And
Really? Including Joseph Stalin, Mao Zedong, Hitler, Pol Pot. Everyone's trying to do their best. Is that why we lock our doors? Is that why we pass legislation against racist policies? Because everyone's trying to do their best? Come on, ma'am.
I think that like Hitler truly believed that what he was teaching was correct, even though it was egregiously, horribly, horrifically wrong. I think in his sick brain, he thought that he was doing what was best.
And ma'am, my point is very simply, we agree about Hitler, but you have no basis for saying that what Hitler did was wrong, because you're a moral relativist.
Yeah.
And if you're a moral relativist, what Hitler did is not absolutely wrong, it's relatively wrong.
Yeah, I'm
I think
similar.
I can still say that it was wrong.
Yeah, from your perspective.
That's kind of what his point though, is that like when you talk about someone like bad like Hitler, right? It's all kind of like relative of what you think is good or bad, but what he thought that was good though. And there were people that followed what he believed, but a framework like Christianity, for example, kind of like outlines like, hey yo, I'm not gonna use Christianity because I have my own problems with Christianity still, but like specifically more so Jesus, right? He more so is like, nah, like killing all these people is wrong, right? Like if you think like, so you're maybe not what the Bible says, but what would Jesus do? It kind of gives you that like more framework of like, all right, now it's not just relative. It's not just like, oh yeah, Hitler thought he was good, so hey, in his eyes good. No, there's like some higher framework now saying, hey yo, nah, that's not really great. And I think that what gives Christianity a little bit of like basis there is that it is over thousands of years. You know, you got to figure the Bible was written by hundreds of people over thousands of years, and it's all collected stories. So these are like kind of like compiled history of like, hey, this is what throughout human history we have come to the conclusion this is bad. So that relative like, hey, what I'm doing is good doesn't stand anymore because now you have a framework, you know. And there are a lot.
It's called cultural arrogance. I'm an arrogant twit if I look at Hitler and say, oh, that was evil. I'm an arrogant twit if I look at Joseph Stalin and say, oh, that was evil. What I should say is, from my cultural perspective, from my biased position, what you guys did was wrong. But that's just my opinion, because it's all relative. And I can't live that way. When I am confronted by a Joseph Stalin or an Adolf Hitler, I don't say, well, my subjective opinion is that that was really naughty. No, I reel with moral indignation saying that was absolutely evil. Just look at the Nuremberg trials. The Nazi officers had some brilliant lawyers. And the lawyers said, whoa, time out. Who do you Americans think you are, and Europeans, judging Nazis? Don't you realize the Nazi officers were just doing what their superiors told them to do? And the Nuremberg trial shut down. Until Robert Jackson, the American counsel, stood up and said, wait a second, there is a law above the law of culture. And according to this law, it makes judgments on people gassing Jews. It's absolutely wrong. What do you think Dr. Martin Luther King wrote in the letter to the Birmingham jail? He wrote, I understand The great state of Alabama has said segregation is good. But guess what, guys? There is a law above the law of the great state of Alabama, and according to this law, segregation is evil. Well, what was King referring to? Obviously, he was referring to the law of God and saying, guess what? If a racist state of Alabama supports segregation, that doesn't make it right. I don't care how much of the culture accepts it. But if there is no God, ma'am, there is nobody above the great state of Alabama. And it's all relative. But Dr. Martin Luther King understood rubbish. There is a God, an intelligent mind, above the laws of the great state of Alabama, and according to God's law, racism is evil. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, and I could point out like some stories in the Bible that I think are morally wrong, like the slaughter of the Canaanites.
Yes. Yeah?
That's just the first one that comes to mind.
Sure.
But I do kind of want to take a step back, and if anybody else
You
wants
bet.
to talk.
Thank you so much for
Thank
talking with
you.
me. I appreciate it immensely.